everyone. I hope you are doing well. So we're back. We're going to do another video. This is the last story out of the Haunted Rockford, Illinois book by Kathi Kresol. So anyways, today's story is James Henry Breasted, the Real Indiana Jones. So light wasn't even on. So am I ready? Now I am. James Henry Breasted was many things to many people, but most would agree that he seemed to be just plain lucky. He had a special knack for being in the right place at the right time. James's grandfather, Thomas Garrison, moved his family from New Jersey to Rockford in 1853. He was in real estate, so he purchased land and built a beautiful home near the present-day John Street and Ridge Avenue area. Rockford has always been filled with beautiful homes, but from all descriptions, the house built by Thomas Garrison was exceptional. It supposedly cost around $24,000 in 1858, a very large sum of money for that time. Unfortunately, the beautiful house was completely consumed by a fire in 1868. The next house built by the family was much less grand, but still a fine house. The Garrison home would be the center of the social life of Rockford, due in part to Thomas's daughter Harriet, who was involved with many activities. Charles Breasted, James's father, was born in New York in 1832. He moved to Rockford in 1853 and became a partner with Israel Souvenir in the hardware business. They opened a hardware store, Breasted and Souvenir Hardware, on South Main Street between State and Elm Streets, in the building that would later become the Chick House. I'll have to do some research on this. I think it's still there. Well, not the hardware store, but I think the building is still there. James Henry Breasted was born in Rockford on August 7, 1865, a son of Charles and Harriet. The family lived on Grant Street when James was a child. He attended Miss Squire's grade school shortly after the Civil War, and it was here that Breasted first uncovered his love of history. James, according to newspaper articles, spent time daydreaming of distant lands that he learned about in books from the local library. He would sit watching the waters of the Rock River and imagine traveling to the places he read about. When James was 8, the family moved to Downers Grove, Illinois, but they continued to return regularly to Rockford to visit his Aunt Bacchus. Later, he would return to visit his parents' graves in Greenwood Cemetery. They both passed away in Chicago. Charles died in 1896 and Harriet in 1921. James may have dreamed of faraway lands, but when he was planning a life for himself, his first choice was a little more down to earth. He planned to be a pharmacist, but then changed his mind and decided to be a preacher. He attended Northwestern University, known now as North Central, in Naperville, Illinois. While he was attending the school for ministry, he discovered his love of languages. James decided to change schools, this time enrolling at Yale, where good timing played a part in his future. It was while James was attending Yale that he met William Rainey Harper, who really encouraged James to attend the University of Berlin to study Hebrew. This decision would open many doors later in his life. James graduated from the University of Berlin with honors in 1894. While he was studying in Berlin, he met the lovely Frances Hart. Again, fate smiled on James, and he married Frances in Berlin before returning to Chicago. James's old teacher, William Rainey Harper, would assist him when he became director of the University of Chicago, and even invited James to become a professor at the school. James worked very hard and spent years teaching, traveling, and lecturing. He would eventually become the very first professor of Egyptology and Eastern history for any American university. By 1899, James was already making a name for himself as one of the best-known archaeologists in the United States. In an article in the local newspaper, it stated, "Quite an interesting list of honors for a Rockford boy, and we are not a bit ashamed of him." James was not content to work just in the classroom. According to the Hyde Park Herald, he dodged snipers, negotiated with sheiks, and uncovered some of the world's greatest art treasures on his trip to the war-ravaged Middle East in 1919 and 1920. Breasted was joined by John D. Rockefeller Jr. to create the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago. Breasted authored many books on the topics of archaeology, Eastern history, and languages. His books are still quoted today. On a trip to the Middle East, James was able to purchase valuable pieces from the Oriental Institute, right before the region changed its policy to discontinue large sales of antiquities? I don't know what that is. Don't even know if I said it right. There is a rumor that the famous Harrison Ford role of Indiana Jones was based on Rockford's very own James Henry Breasted. Even if the rumor is false, that is exactly the kind of man that James was, always ready for the next adventure. James's luck held again when he was in the area of the Nile working on a project for the Oriental Institute. Howard Carter discovered King Tut's tomb and summoned James to the tomb to help decipher some of the royal seals. He was one of the first to enter the tomb of the boy king. His translation of the hieroglyphs found on the walls confirmed the identity of the boy king, and his work in the tomb led Howard Carter to discover, I know I'm going to jack this name up, so let's go, Tutankhamun's mummy. James supposedly stayed 2 long weeks down in the tomb and even slept in the chambers until the priceless items could be secured. His close association with this discovery would lead to rumors of a curse later. James was very successful in his professional life, but unlike other adventurers of his day, James did not travel alone. Frances, James's wife, would accompany her husband on most of his expeditions, penetrating many remote parts of the world. She set up housekeeping on the Nile, was by his side when they were almost killed in a rafting expedition, and even assisted him when he traveled to the ruins of Persepolis in Persia. The couple had 3 children, Charles, James Jr., and a daughter, Astrid. Francis shared his triumphs and tragedies and did it all without much acknowledgement. James would also discover the stables of King Solomon at Armageddon and King Sargon's temples in Assyria. Later, he would uncover the palace grounds of Alexander the Great. He did this all while maintaining his association with the Oriental Institute for 40 years. Breasted would give wonderful presentations, sharing photos of the places he had visited. One such trip involved the Temple of the Sun by Ramses II. People in the audience stated that they were transported to those far-off places. James could turn back time in his presentations until those locations, now buried in sand, seemed to rise shining anew before the audience. James also sprinkled his near-death experiences in the talks, leaving his audiences thrilled with tales of barely escaping death at the hands of natives or thrilling raft rides over rapids. It would irritate James that the most common question asked after one of these lectures was about the curse of King Tut's tomb. The curse stemmed from the words etched on the entrance to Tut's tomb. Death shall come on swift wings to him that toucheth the tomb of the Pharaoh. The rumor spread that many people who entered the tomb would later die an early death. Since James's wife Frances had also spent time in the tomb, she too supposedly became a victim of the curse when she passed away in 1934. The first to die was the man who financed Howard Carter's expeditions, Lord George Herbert, the Earl of Carvenon. He died on March 25, 1923, and as the tale states, all of the lights went out in Cairo at the exact time of his death. His favorite dog, Susie, back home at the estate in England, gave a sharp howl and dropped dead at the same time that Carvenon drew his last breath. Lord Carvenon was not in the best of health even before arriving in Egypt. He also received a very nasty mosquito bite that he nicked while shaving that later caused a bad infection that entered his blood. Lord Cavernon's mysterious death caught the attention of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who helped spread the curse rumors. Some say that the origins of the curse might have stemmed from Howard Carter himself. He feared that the treasure he found would be stolen and knew that the slaves might talk. He supposedly started the rumor to discourage the superstitious men from breaking in and stealing the priceless items. Howard Carter would not have been the first to suggest a cursed mummy killing those who dared to desecrate the tombs of royals. The first ghost story about a mummy was published in 1699. Later, the claims would spread from those who entered the tomb to include anyone who touched an item from the tomb. No matter who started it, Carter and Breasted quickly grew frustrated with the subject. Even though James called the curse Tommy Rot, the rumors continued long after both Howard Carter and James Henry Breasted were gone. The last story of a death allegedly caused by the curse took place in the 1970s, when a maintenance man died while unpacking an exhibit of the items from King Tut's tomb in London. The museum supposedly covered up the death for over 20 years in order to dispel the rumors the death would cause. James's wife Frances died in July 1934 after a very exciting life traveling to different countries and helping her husband and children fulfill their dreams. James would remarry when he was 69. His new bride, Imogen, was a sister of his first wife and was 50 when they wed. Breasted became ill during the couple's honeymoon trip to Egypt. He died traveling home to New York City in December 1935. His ashes were brought to Greenwood Cemetery so that he could be buried next to his parents. In a biography of his father, James's son Charles wrote, "His visits always included a quiet hour in the Greenwood Cemetery beside the grave of his parents. He seemed to derive strength and inspiration from contemplating their peaceful sleep, and comfort from knowing that when his longest journey was ended, he would lie beside them." Later, a slab of stone from the Valley of the Kings would be sent by the Egyptian government in memory of all James had done for its country. James's death led people to speculate whether he was part of the curse placed on anyone who dared to enter the tomb, despite the fact that he was 70 years old when he died. James was so worried that people would blame the curse that he arranged for the New York Times to post statements from 3 different doctors that his death was from natural causes and not because of King Tut's curse. The papers did this, but they all mentioned that Breasted was the 7th person to die of the 22 who originally entered the tomb. James Henry Breasted's story still intrigues people today, nearly 80 years after his death. People are still fascinated by the thrilling tales of his adventures, the possibility of a royal mummy's curse, and the story of this hometown Rockford boy whose fate became so closely connected with a boy king from thousands of years ago. And that is the end of that story and that book, guys. We did it. Anyways, if you guys liked this video, give me a thumbs up. If you guys want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. And as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day. Bye.